I were to describe modern French cinema in one word, it'd be fluid. American cinema is engulfed by Hollywood, marginalizing anything less than superhero blockbusters to indie studios. I'm being overly dramatic, but things have changed dramatically. But in the country where cinema was birthed, France, modern artists forge ahead with decades of previous innovators to build on. In 2017, I realized just how many fantastic French films were hitting American shores and how refreshing they were, even in a year as cinematically rich as 2017. Films like Raw, Heal the Living, and Nocturama made me appreciate French cinema for the first real time. And so today, I'd like to give a very brief overview of some of France's best modern auteurs. I'll be focusing mainly on directors actively working today, or in the 2010s. Directors like Jean-Luc and Michel Haneke will be excluded because, let's be honest, you already know a lot about them. And they're not exactly spring chickens anymore. France seems to breed more auteurs than other European countries. But why is that? Societally, the country is quite proud of their contributions to cinema, and that pride trickles down to the government as well. In an article, The Future of French Cinema, Richard Brody writes how the government is integral to the French film industry, especially after World War II, when American films were regulated and quote-unquote homegrown creations were promoted. The Nouvelle Vague emerged not long after, solidifying the idea of auteur, and French films on whole were elevated to art house status. But auteurs are born, not created. Still, the system depends on them, which accounts for the inevitable inflation of the number of films made and of the number of mediocre, ostensible art films produced. It's the art film industry, or all too often, some soft-centered version of art films that sustains the image of French films around the world, often less by way of inventive artistry than by a culturally toned range of subjects that substitutes genteel intellectualism and superficial politics for cinematic audacity. On the other hand, there's a commercial French film industry, one that makes movies for the wider French public, but for which there isn't necessarily much hope in the way of export, though the success of The Artist and of Intouchables, a French variety of Driving Miss Daisy, may well encourage the industry's mainstream. Imagine that, a film industry where mainstream films have less of a chance at crossover than art films. This all points to the fact that the French film industry is far less specialized than Hollywood, and it's a lot wilder and more unpredictable. The Brooklyn Academy of Music describes Olivier Assayas as a post-punk auteur, and it's not hard to see why. Rodrigo Perez, writing for IndieWire, described the director as a guy who directs his lens toward the margins of society, who chronicles the characters of counterculture, if you will. Rebellious teens, recovering drug addicts, misunderstood authors/auteurs, and scantily clad femme fatales, you have a friend in Olivier Assayas. Or at least a guy who cares about you, who looks at you not with scorn or pity but with empathy, a kind that never condescends no matter how down and out his subjects may seem. Assayas' films also embody a certain mystical quality to them, most blatantly is 2016's Personal Shopper, whose plot revolves around apparitions merging with modernism. His films are ravishing, perhaps so gorgeous they trickle into our memories like a vivid dream. Whether he's perfectly capturing the fuzzy orange glow of the 70s in his magnum opus Carlos, or the sinking detachment of stardom in Clouds of Sils Maria, every element is in balletic synchronicity. Perhaps France's most popular modern auteur, Audiard has found vast acclaim since the 2000s. A common theme among French directors is their willingness, as Rodrigo Perez mentioned, to show the underprivileged, reflecting a kind of widely accepted socialism from Europe. Audiard does the same, but with more volatility. His characters are most often aggressive or marred by trauma, struggling to free themselves from a mire of violence. Often their hope for salvation revolves around family. Japan, which won the Palme d'Or in 2015, is about a Syrian refugee fleeing to France with a constructed family. Rust and Bone stars a fisticuff boxer aiding a paraplegic Marion Cotillard. A young man struggles to ascend and escape prison in A Prophet. Audiard's most recent film as of this video, The Sisters Brothers, stars a sadistic Joaquin Phoenix and a more pacifist John C. Reilly, as hitmen brothers at odds with each other. Audiard's style is less controlled and aesthetically rich as Assayas, but undeniably striking. His camera is often handheld, moving with intention, fitting his gritty stories. As you'll see moving forward, French directors seem to fit into two camps, the rigid serenity of modern essayists and the handheld freneticism of Audiard. More on that later. Bonello is a prime example of controlled French cinema. Every shot of Bonello's films are precise, letting the acting, story, and cinematography speak. Many scenes in Saint Laurent are so visually striking, especially in color, I was reminded of Nicholas Winding Refn's films. Bonello takes stories that, from their premises, could easily be studio dramas or thrillers, and cuts the fat, focusing on people in waiting, trapped between consumerism and transcendence. Whether the subjects are child terrorists, bordello girls, or suffering artists, empathy remains, not dissimilar to essayist's films. Léos Carax's pre-2010s filmography is filled with grimy urban stories akin to Mike Leigh's Naked, following on those equally trapped in their humanity and the streets. Films like Lovers on the Bridge and Pola X revolve around filthy urchins scrambling and writhing across urban sprawls in search of twisted love. Holy Motors, his return in 2013, marked an even grander statement that retained his irrepressible edge. Holy Motors is both blunt and elusive, a film about the performances we give across our lives. Thus, it finds new ground for the theme of identity. Luckily, Carax has already announced his next film, so it seems safe to say he'll be continuing to hurl his cinematic grenades into French modernism's lap. The Dardennais have been Cannes darlings for years, winning the Palme d'Or for both The Child in 2005 and Rosetta in 1999. But they've released two films in the 2010s, The Kid with a Bike and 2 Days, 1 Night, and a new film on the way. Described as socialist filmmakers, the Dardennais are the most open and grounded in portraying the underprivileged plight in French society. What marks them for socialist labeling is that they never back down from showing the uncaring systems that pit neighbor against neighbor. Like a French Ken Loach, the Dardennais depict the desperate struggle, almost in real time, of Marion Cotillard, who must either be laid off or convince her equally impoverished co-workers to take a pay cut to keep her on. The Kid with a Bike focuses on an abandoned child trying to find his neglectful father. Despite the indifferent authorities, a woman takes him in. These films are far from happy-go-lucky. Like Spike Lee, they wake us up to the realities of a capitalist system through narrative. But there is always hope, because there is always love. Denis is one of the most unflinching feminist directors of all time, depicting femininity and females in all their beauty and warts. While some try to boil feminism down to having perfect girls in the background, Denis, as a woman herself, exposes all of us to an uncompromising vision, refusing to reduce anybody, male or female. But she doesn't just focus on women. Masculinity, like in Beau Travail, and lovers of all kind, as in Trouble All Day, fall under her eviscerating gaze. Her characters function as metaphorical and thematic pawns, while still inhabiting lives of their own. But what about Denis' more recent work? In White Material, Isabelle Huppert stubbornly refuses to leave a war-torn African nation that she desperately still wants to profit off of. All the while, her neglected son falls into the madness of war. For 2 undisturbed hours, we watch Juliette Binoche and Let the Sunshine In expend all her emotions in the search for love, her artistic career slipping away as she obsesses over the minutiae of each lover. If you're craving more, Denis' newest film, High Life, a science fiction film starring Robert Pattinson and Juliette Binoche, is set for release this year. Debuting his first film at Cannes at the age of 18 no less, Xavier Dolan has accomplished much in his short but ambitious career. Like Paul Thomas Anderson, his films are as brash and loud as his characters, who scream their desire to give and be loved. A lack of self-consciousness that inevitably comes from being a young artist allows Dolan to experiment with visuals and story. Having grown exponentially from his first feature, I Killed My Mother, Dolan hasn't lost any steam and continues taking risks. Whether he's pioneering a queer thriller in Tom at the Farm, aggressively adopting different aspect ratios in Mommy, or using constant close-ups in It's Only the End of the World, his filmography stretches the limits of drama and queer cinema. At his best, Dolan portrays unconventional friends and family who need each other, yet struggle to realize or entertain this notion. There is always conflict among these families, but without supporting each other, the world eats them alive. Hansen-Love's films are uncannily grounded. Likely much of that is due to her insistence on wide and medium shots that always place the characters in their very real surroundings. Her films eschew any type of plot and revolve tightly around domestic lives, but she does it with such clarity and painful realism Her films are magnetic in their domesticity. Her interests flood into her films, which often revolve around people with very specific careers, like philosophy or architecture. She has the remarkable gift of making sense of unexplainable complex emotions through, instead of words like David Foster Wallace, moving images. Whether her movies focus on teenagers like in Goodbye First Love, 20-something party kids in Eden, or middle-aged teachers in Things to Come, they're all coming-of-age stories. Hazanavicius is an unabashed lover of cinema's rich history, much like the country he hails from. Whether he's lovingly appropriating 30s silent films for his Oscar-winning The Artist, focusing on Godard's love life in Godard Mon Amour, successfully one-upping Matthew Vaughn in James Bond parody in OSS 117 Cairo Nest of Spies, Hazanavicius parodies these eras, but grants his characters surprising nuance. Kashish is primarily known for his 2013 Palme d'Or winner Blue is the Warmest Color. Unfortunately, most think only of the gratuitous nature of the film when it's mentioned, despite the immense, pardon the pun, warmth at play. A tenderness for his characters also comes across in his The Secret of the Grain, about a lowly immigrant seeking to open a restaurant despite domestic conflict. Kashish often uses handheld camera work, but his films are anything but frenetic in their presentation. Every scene is allowed to play out, focusing on the faces, the bodies of the characters. Wide establishing shots are used sparingly, for relief, an inverse of hansen-love. He possesses a soft, glimmering aesthetic that uncannily wraps around to reality. Like James Ponsolt's best films, by working hard to achieve what appears to be undisturbed realness, Kashish touches a grounded quality few directors can. Alas, we've only scratched the surface of the wide-ranging world of modern French cinema. This will be a list of directors and their works that I've either seen not enough of or not at all. Hopefully this will give you an even greater list of films and auteurs to work on seeing, myself included. If you're looking to dip your toes into foreign cinema, French films are an exciting place to start. French culture does little to dissuade artists from pursuing bold dreams for the chance of being an auteur. In America, the dream is to get an Oscar, but in France, they have Cannes, the largest, most important film festival in the world. Even if you're put off by auteur theory, or have researched the problems filmmakers lob at the overly expensive French film industry, keeping an ear out for French talent will open you up to a bedrock of accomplished work. Certainly there are mediocre films, as Richard Brody posits, but like any medium, there's a joy in and of itself of wading through art to find even that one film that could change your life.